got to learn how to produce.
All right, we are live. We are here back in the studio, back in the cockpit to have another cockpit conversation. I am retired Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Jason Harris, Air Force pilot, mobility pilot, special operations pilot, now retired, turned keynote speaker and airline pilot. And we're going to be having a cockpit conversation. So, just going to be chopping it up here with my main man, my best friend, my brother, Dana Harris. What's going on, Dana? How you doing today, man?
Another day in paradise, brother. Um,
Yes, yes, yes. It is another day in paradise and another great day to be alive.
yes, sir. Yes, sir. Feeling good, man. How about you?
Hey, man, I'm feeling good. Life is good, man. And it's another beautiful day to be alive, like I always say, man. And I'm always excited for us to be able to jump in here and have a conversation and talk about what's on your mind, what's on my mind, and also what's on other folks' mind, man. So, what's the vibe this morning?
Um, One of the topics that comes to all right, let me give you a quick backstory. So I'm one of those people that my philosophy when I go to work is I don't come here to make friends, but I understand that I work with people, right? Some more closely than others. And I noticed in your keynote, right? The main topic is trust, right? And so at times in our working relationships, right? There is there are situations that happen when trust is broken, and it may be from the leadership side. The leader may feel like they have broken the trust of a team member, or it might be from the team member looking up to the leadership and they feel like the trust is broken. um, how do you initiate that conversation from either direction, top to bottom or bottom to top? How do you initiate that conversation and then work through that breach of trust and determine maybe whether it's necessary to rebuild it or whether it's just, hey, we create a functional relationship and we keep it to what it is?
Man, you realize you just asked a whole lot. So you didn't just ask me one question. You asked me like about 10 different questions. But I like the way I like where you're going here, man. And so I think, when we first start this out as far as trust, let's just start with, like you said, you alluded to it. There's two types of trust that I try to focus on, and those two types of trust is functional trust. Can you do the job? How do you do the job? And are you good at doing your job? I'm going to trust you to either be able to execute the mission or not. That's functional, just purely a function of can you do the job? And then there's the relational trust. And when it comes to the relational trust, the question becomes is how are we building that relationship, right? And
Mm.
so what does that relationship look like, and is the relationship worthwhile? Now let me like give some context to this, because I think people miss this. Like, when you're creating a high trust organization, when you're creating a a high performance team, especially if I'm relating that to my experience as it pertains to my time in special operations, my time flying mobility aircraft, in any aviation type of environment in the military, and a little bit to the airlines, but more so the military side, because we created this high performance team environment, and you had to be good functionally. Like, in order for you to get to be allowed to go out there and do the mission, you had to be good at doing your job. If you're not, then we had our ways to make sure we would retrain you. And then if we realized you just can't keep up, we would be like, hey man, we're gonna find a better place for you to go. Right? And so we had to be honest with people in that regards. And then the other piece of that is we had to have the relationship levels built to a point to where I know that you have my back. And if I know that you have my back, then I have the ability to trust you on the other side, which is that relational piece. And we would
Hmm.
share things with each other that were relationship building. Now, on the other side of that coin, other side of that spectrum, as an airline pilot, here's the thing, man. I have shown up to the airlines, I have shown up to the airplane, never having flown to the destination before a day in my life, never having met any of the other pilots a day in my life. And oh, by the way, only one of the four pilots have flown to the location we're going to. You know,
Wow.
and sometimes none of us have flown to that location because it doesn't require a special qualification. Now, for the company, think about this. The company is trusting us with an aircraft that is worth millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars. They're trusting us with people, cargo. They're trusting us to make sure that we deliver the people and the cargo safely to their destination. There is no relationship about that. There is no relational trust involved in that whatsoever. That is purely a function of functional trust. Can you do your job? Yes,
Hmm.
if you could do your job, we checked you off. We validated that you understood the training. We validated that you know how to leverage the standard operating procedures, the checklist, those processes, and we empowered you to go out here and do the job. Like that. That's it. That's all we care about. And we're not worried about when we're sitting in that cockpit what kind of relationship that you're building. You know what I'm saying? We're just worried, can you do the job? So I start with that, and I'll let you jump back in because you had a bunch of questions, but I want to just kind of address that piece first.
I like that explanation because, and it connects to my philosophy of I don't go to work to make friends. Like, I understand we're here to work as a team to do a specific job. And when you explain it like that, it makes me think about, like, whoa, as a passenger, we're exercising the ultimate trust, right? Because we wouldn't know these things, right? For me, in my experience of flying, been flying all my life, but I guess in my mind, until you became a pilot and were able to explain these things, I'm thinking, hey, maybe this crew is with this plane, and then they just switch out the flight attendant crew and things like that. So the other piece to the question is now. So you talked about functional trust and relational trust, right? And where you kind of answered one of the questions is determine, is this a situation where you need functional and relational trust, or if you only need one? And
Right.
so, functional trust to me, it sounds like is more important than relational trust. Would you agree?
No.
Talk
it,
about it.
so here's the thing, man. Like at the end of the day, trust it's not just a vibe, right? Like at the trust is it's an operating system all around, and when trust begins to fail, right, then everything else begins to fail. And
Stop.
so
Run that back. Trust
tr-
is not just a vibe.
trust is not just a vibe, it's an operating system. And when trust fails, performance begins to fail all around. Now, when that functional trust fails, clearly performance fails. And when the relational trust begins to fail in the environments where it's needed, performance begins to fail as well. And
Mm.
so I don't put one as more important than the other. However, we have to understand that we have to understand what's needed in the environment. That's why I gave you the two different environments. I gave you the military environment, which
Hmm.
is high performance teams. And then I gave you the airline environment, which is just show up and do your job. And
Hmm.
it's no disrespect to that space, but as an airline pilot, I don't need to build any relational trust. Why? I don't need to, I might never fly with that person again. And if I am not built for creating relational trust and I'm not trying to build a cohesive team beyond just this one trip, then what's the point of it? Right? And so again, oh, go ahead, man. You was about to say something. I saw you leaning in.
Because and my objective is going to be to speak from the person in the audience
Yeah,
who
man.
says, you make a statement and you say, and I know you may be thinking, Jason, we're not in combat. You say, I challenge that way of thinking, and I say you are in combat. You're in the combat of life. So to that point that you just made, what do you say to the person that says, I'm not in aviation? I'm working in C-suite at a Fortune 100 company, maybe a Fortune 500 company, maybe a smaller company, where they say, "Hey, we have to work together on a regular basis. What do you say to that person?
So in that case, then yeah, now we're talking where we need to create relational trust. And so yes, you're right, man. Like you might not be in combat, but you're in the combat of business and the combat of life. And so in the combat of business and combat of life, you have to build trust. Trust is essential. Trust is not optional. It is operational. Trust will dictate the level of performance in your organization. It'll dictate the level of success of your organization. It has to be foundational. And so if you're in this company, whether it's Fortune 100 to the mom and pop small business around the corner, when you have a team, the question becomes is what kind of team are you trying to create? Now, if
Mm,
I start with what kind of team are you trying to create, and if you let's just simplify this. While you can just create widgets, and you could just spin out widgets. Do you want to just have a company that spins out widgets? Or do you want to have a company that spins out widgets and has excellent customer service? And the reason that they have excellent customer service is because internally they are treating their team members with excellence. They're creating relational trust with their team members. And they're building that level of trust where they can connect with each other, understand each other, and that they can operate at a high tempo together and they operate in a high performance way. So that's why this becomes important. And of course, the functional side is important. You got to put out solid widgets. Like, I want you to
yeah.
put out good widgets and I want you to know how to put them out consistently, how to put them out with excellence, how to put out the best widget. But I also want you to understand that within that company, in high performance, high trust environments, what we're doing is we're creating that relational trust because now people say, I want to actually feel like I'm part of a team. People want to feel like they are part of a team. They want to feel like they are respected, like they are valued for what they bring to the table. That's where that relational trust begins to matter. And that's where
Mm,
people start leaning in. And I think that's where people will say, you know what? I'm actually willing to make less money and stay here because I'm in a culture where I feel valued, where I feel heard, where I feel understood, where I feel acknowledged, where the leadership takes action. Like, and then if you're that leader in that C suite of that organization, or even if you're that mid level manager by title, whatever your role is, what are you doing to create that level of relational trust to where people are like, yo, Dana took care of me. Dana looks out for me. I know that Dana actually cares about me as a person, not just as a widget maker. That's where you start making a difference in these organizations as it pertains to that relational trust piece.
mm. So is that a piece that people always ask the question, are leaders made or born, right? So when you speak to that piece of being able to bring that feeling out of someone, do you think it is something that as a leader it's innate, or is this something that maybe is part of the SOPs and the culture of the company? Or is that something that the individual has to have the desire to work on? So, like me as a mid level manager, I have to have the desire to make the team members that are working with me feel heard and understood. Or is that something that maybe the SOPs from the organization can teach me?
So, funny thing is, John Maxwell says people ask him that question all the time: Are leaders born? Or are they made? They're born. You have to be born, like right. But but with that, while like in some cases, some people are naturally trained and raised to create relational trust, to build that. For some people, it just comes naturally by virtue of who they are. It comes naturally by virtue of how they operate. It comes naturally by virtue of what they've experienced throughout their life. So, like for
Absolutely.
me, when you ask me sometimes, and other people ask me, like, well, man, how did you get into doing this keynote stuff, and how did you get into talking about trust? Well, a big piece of that literally goes back to mom. It goes back to our mom and what she told me about how she was treated in the army when she was enlisted in the army. And
Mm,
and most people don't realize, man, for me, when I was when I went to college, when I went to the Air Force Academy, I didn't go there to fly airplanes. I went there for the college education. And so the two jobs that I was initially planning to take on was I was either going to be a maintenance officer or I was going to be a security forces officer, which is a cop in the military, a police officer in the military.
Hmm.
And the reason why I was going to do those two jobs was because it was going to allow me to immediately have the opportunity to lead airmen, to lead men and women, to lead these members that signed up, and to have a chance to make a difference by how they are
Mm.
being led. So that's part of my foundation. And so you go back to, I've been working towards this idea of relationships for a long time. And so some people, they've been working towards this idea of relationships for a long time. Now, back to the essence of what you were asking. Are leaders born or are they made? And can we do things internally in our company? I think all the above. I think you help to condition and train someone. What I realize as I've been studying leadership and as I've been working with various companies, doing some executive coaching, especially on the executive coaching level, what you learn is this: people are taught how to do their job, and they can do their jobs really, really well. But
Right.
guess what? They don't teach them about how to lead people.
100%. 100%.
You could be really good at your job. You could be a really good pilot. You could be a really good math instructor. You could be a really good engineer. You could be really good at whatever your job is. But guess what? No one is teaching you about how to lead. And then they tap you on the shoulder and go, hey man, you're really good at what you do. Since you're really good at what you do, how about you go ahead and take over and be in charge of the organization? And if you're in charge of the organization or in charge of that team that you were really good at, then they will all be just as good as you. No, it don't
Eh.
work that way, right? Like it don't work that way.
It reminds me of the salesman story that you tell from the stage.
Yeah, man, like the oftentimes what they'll do is they'll take the number one salesman. They'll be like, dude, you're the number one salesperson. So now we're going to put you in charge of the team. And then the performance of the team just goes down. And they're like, well, what happened to the team? And it's like, no, that guy, that man, that woman, that person, they were really good at sales,
Mm.
but they had no experience at leading and they had no experience at teaching people how to sell. So you actually destroyed that team and you destroyed that person or you messed their vibe up because
Hmm.
you threw them into a position that they weren't prepared for. And so
Mm.
you have to prepare someone to lead. And so in doing that, you have to train them about what your expectations of leadership are. And as you train them
Mm.
on what your expectations of leadership are, then you begin to create these spaces for them to get better at it. And then you create opportunities for them to practice it. And as you do that, then people get better at it and they begin to understand what it means to lead. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm. Hmm. What are some takeaways, because we want the people to take away something from this conversation, right? So what are some necessary takeaways that you want anyone watching this or listening to this, shout out to the replay squad, that they can take away about relational trust and functional trust, uh, if they are feeling like they're struggling with trust within their team or in their career or whatnot.
Yeah, man. So I love that question. And so what I would say is this: understand the environment that you're in. Does the environment require more than just functional trust? Does the environment require you to be better at just being good at more than just doing your job? And so understand what that means. Like no matter what, you need to be good at your job. And then from there, the functional or the relational side, you need to understand what it means to create relational trust. And then understand why you're creating that relational trust. Because you begin to understand that it is actually connecting with people on an individual basis that allows you to create that connection that leads to commitment, that leads to ability that then leads to that trust, that relational trust. And so understand when it's needed, understand why it's needed, and understand how to build it. And then consider this: if you are new in a position of leadership, or you've been in a position of leadership and you feel uncomfortable and you feel like you're out of place because you were really good at your job, but yet you are struggling with leadership, then I would encourage you to begin to understand that your role in this leadership position is no longer to be the smartest person on the job and to be the best person on the job. Your role is now to be the best person when it comes to relational trust. And your job is now to build that level of trust with those people that you have been entrusted with, and to then help them to be the best at their job and to bring out the best in them. That's what leaders do. So understand how to knock out your job, understand when relational trust is needed, understand how to build it and who to build it with, and those are the takeaways. What else you got for takeaways, man?
I have a question before the takeaways
Absolutely, go for it.
because I want the people to know, where do I start? I hear you saying basically work at being a better leader. Where do I start, Jason?
Where do, man, that's an excellent question. Where do I start? You start with where you're at. So take an assessment of who you are. Take an assessment of what you know. Take an assessment of how you connect with people. And what I would also encourage is you to say, what I would encourage people to do is to go and take a personality assessment to
Thank you.
understand. That was you, man. Man, why did you
No,
just say
because
that?
I was gonna go practical. What do you mean? Am I taking a test? Am I self-assessing or am I assessing?
Yeah. So, and that's an excellent question, man. And I think a lot of times we have self assessed, but we haven't actually done an assessment that is a legitimate assessment. There are some free personality assessments that you can take. And when you take those free personality assessments, it will allow you to understand who you are based on some questions. And then if you want to begin to take it up a few notches, as Emerald Lagasse say, take it up a notch, then you can start getting into the more detailed personality assessments to really go deeper and understand yourself. And then the next thing is once you begin to understand yourself, and then you begin to understand the various aspects of personalities, then you can begin to understand how you interact with those around you. And depending on your organization, then you might be able to petition to say, hey, I would like my team to all take a personality assessment so that we can then understand how do we communicate with each other. And if you just start with that, that level of self-awareness is game changing.
Now, my takeaway, I love that. I'm glad you touched on that. My takeaway is, in order to build trust within my team in my career, I must first trust myself.
Mm.
And many times we get into our careers and we work our way up, man, and we have some we're in a position or title of leadership, but we don't always know if we're a leader or not. Some of us have the skill and don't even believe that we're a leader. Little old me self-sabotage, things like that. So like I said, my takeaway is, we have to have trust within ourselves first before we can go into our careers and get others to trust us. It's like hey, just trust me. I don't know you. So the more we know ourselves and we tap into those different types of assessments, personality assessments, then we know more about who we are, and then now we know more about who our team members are, and now that helps build the relational trust. The functional trust, I think, comes. It's a little simpler because it's easy to tell me whether or not I'm doing my job. It's the relational trust that is a little, it's deeper work because it's inner work to build that relational trust.
Yeah, man, I think you're spot on, man. There's a lot of inner work that has to happen, and so to your point, we have to start with ourselves. Where do I start at? I got to understand who I am. I need to understand my personality. I need to understand how my personality engages with the rest of the world. And if I begin to understand that, that changes the dynamic. And then I have to begin to understand and appreciate who I am, understand and appreciate the value that I bring, and understand and appreciate that I'm actually worthy, I'm actually valuable,
Mm.
and that I can actually learn even more and have the capacity to be even better than what I am now. And instead of doubting myself, I'm going to believe in myself. And I'm going to make certain that I fortify and build a foundation to not just believe in myself, but to trust myself to be out here and to lead myself and to lead others, to trust myself to be able to be really good at my job, the functional side
Mm-hmm.
of it, and then also be able to be really good at building the relationships and the relational side of trust. So for me, man, the other thing that I would throw out there is that no, we're not here to make best friends at work, and I love how you started with that. So kind of coming back to how you started this. When I show up at the job, even when I was in military special operations, I wasn't there to make friends, but I made some of the best friends that I've had, and I maintain those friendships to this day. And part of why I maintain those friendships to this day is because we were all really good at our jobs, but then
Mm-hmm.
we also began to be really good at building relationships and being open and honest with each other about what our character traits was, open and honest with what we brought to the table, and we began to build those relationships up that we could trust each other. And so now I try to bring that into any environment that I'm in to make sure that I'm not just being really good at my job, but I'm also
Mm-hmm.
being really good at building the relationships so that I can create a high performance environment. And when I'm doing executive coaching, I try to make sure that my executive coaching clients that they also understand that it's okay to
Mm.
be really good at your job, but once you're promoted, you step away from being the best at your job and you step into being the best at leading while understanding how to be the best at the job. Your role is no longer to be the best in that job. Your role is now to be the best in your job. Your role is a leader. And so there's a lot for us to take away and there's a lot for us to understand. Um, and there's a lot of work to be done. But great conversation today, man. Any parting shots, save rounds you got for us, brother?
No, man, I think this has been great. I think you landed that plane without even turning the seatbelt sign on, man.
Ooh wee!
That
Well,
that
look, man.
smooth landing when you hover and you kind of get all right, the wheels gonna touch the ground right about now.
Bet. Well, thank you, man. As always, I appreciate the conversation. For those who are dialing in, like, subscribe, um, put that reminder in there, click that bell so that you get a notification when we have a new episode. We really appreciate you guys dialing in, tuning in. If you have questions, thoughts, feedback, throw them in the comment section, and we'll make sure that we grab that. And we would love to be able to answer your questions here when we have our next cockpit conversation. If you want to dial in direct, Jason at nofailtrust.com. Dana at nofailtrust.com. And we'll put the links for you to get that 7 skill sets to No Fail Trust if you want to start somewhere right away. Again, take care, everybody. Blue skies, fair winds, and all the best.
Peace.